The soft glow of paper lanterns cast wavering shadows against the lacquered walls of the secluded chamber. A faint scent of jasmine lingered in the air, mingling with the subtle musk of aged silk and polished wood. Madame Lion stood by the window, her silver-streaked hair catching the light, shimmering like a river of moonlight flowing down her back. Her dark eyes, sharp and penetrating, scanned the courtyard below, yet her thoughts were miles away, tangled in the threads of a secret she dared not voice. Across the room, Minister Zhou's imposing figure filled the space with quiet authority. His high-rank robes rustled softly as he approached, the clack of his boots muted by the thick embroidered carpet. His sharp features were drawn tight with conflict, eyes flickering with a mixture of desire and dread. The weight of his political duty pressed heavily upon his broad shoulders, but in this stolen moment, he was simply a man caught between love and loyalty. "The walls have ears, Madame Lion," he whispered, voice low but urgent. "Our bond is a risk that could ruin us both." She turned, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Yet, Minister Zhao, is not the heart's rebellion as potent as any sword? We serve the dynasty, yes, but at what cost to our souls?" Their words hung in the air, laden with unspoken fears and hopes. Outside, the palace remained a fortress of silence, but within these walls, a fragile truth blossomed beneath the heavy shroud of secrecy. Unbeknownst to them, Wei Chen lingered in the shadows beyond a carved screen, his breath held tight. The painter's keen eyes took in every subtle glance, every tremor of the hand, every falter in the minister's voice. This was no mere political alliance. It was a delicate dance of vulnerability and defiance, a secret that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the court. Wei Chen's heart ached with a melancholy born of understanding. Here were two souls caught in the same impossible bind as himself, trapped by duty, yet yearning for something more. The painter's brush had long wrestled with the paradox of immortalizing a man while erasing his true self. Now he saw that the palace's power was not just built on decrees and portraits, but on silences held and sacrifices made in the shadows. Madame Lion stepped closer to Minister Zhao, reaching out to graze his hand with a delicate touch, a fleeting promise in the dim light. "If we are to survive, we must be cautious, yet I cannot deny the fire that still burns within me." The minister's gaze softened, the stern mask slipping for a moment. "Then we shall guard that fire in secret, as the dynasty guards its fragile peace. But be warned, should our truth be discovered, the consequences will be dire." A silence settled between them, heavy with the weight of unspoken fears and the bittersweet taste of forbidden affection. Wei Chen withdrew silently, the image of their fragile connection seared into his memory. Later that night, the palace corridors echoed with the distant footsteps of Minister Zhao as he slipped away into the darkness, leaving Madame Lion alone with her thoughts. She stood by the window, the cool night air brushing against her skin, her expression a blend of sorrow and steely resolve. The secret they shared was a fragile thread woven into the tapestry of palace intrigues, a thread that, if pulled, might unravel not only their lives but the delicate balance of power itself. For Wei Chen, this revelation deepened the shadows within his own heart. The painter who sought to capture truth through illusion now bore witness to the human frailty beneath the grandeur of the throne. In the quiet of the night, he wondered how many other secrets lay hidden beneath the lacquered surfaces of the empire. As the moon climbed higher, Wei Chen returned to his studio, his brush poised but hesitant. The faces he painted carried not only the weight of history, but the silent sorrows of those who lived beneath its gaze. Tonight, the portraits seemed to whisper of love and loss, of loyalty torn between duty and desire. The court's delicate equilibrium teetered on the edge. And Wei Chen knew that the unveiling of his next masterpiece would not just immortalize an emperor, but reveal the fragile human stories that power sought to erase. His hand trembled slightly as he began to sketch anew, each stroke a quiet rebellion, each shadow a secret waiting to be told. And as the first light of dawn touched the palace rooftops, The painter's heart was heavier with the knowledge that in this forbidden love, as in his art, truth and illusion danced an eternal waltz, fragile as a whispered promise in the night. The air in the palace had shifted, an almost tangible weight pressing down on every corridor and chamber. Wei Chen sensed it in the hurried footsteps that echoed faintly behind closed doors, in the furtive glances exchanged between officials, and in the restless murmurs that floated through the marble halls like a brewing storm. It was a fragile peace, a brittle calm that threatened to shatter at any moment. Wei Chen sat before his easel in the secluded chamber assigned to him, the half-finished portrait of Emperor Zhu Yujian staring back at him with an unsettling stillness. The emperor's painted eyes seemed to flicker with a secret life, a mixture of regal pride and concealed fear. The brush in Wei Chen's hand trembled, slightly not from weakness, but from the weight of what he was about to capture. Jin Hoa, his young apprentice, lingered nearby, restless energy barely contained within his slender frame. Master Jin Ho began, his voice low but edged with urgency. Must art always serve the emperor's will? Can't it reveal something more, something true? Wei Chen turned to him, meeting the bright gaze of the boy whose fingers were stained with ink and rebellion. Art is a language, Wei Chen replied cautiously, but it is also a weapon, a shield. It can protect or expose. Jin Hua's eyes sparkled with defiance. Then why must we hide the truth? Before Wei Chen could answer, the heavy wooden door creaked, and Madame Lion entered, her silver-streaked hair catching the flicker of candlelight. Her presence commanded silence, and even Jin Hoa fell quiet under her piercing gaze. The emperor's reign grows more precarious, Madame Lion said, her voice a soft but firm echo in the chamber. Whispers of rebellion stir among the ministers and generals. The fragile threads holding this dynasty together are unraveling, and your paintings, Wei Chen, carry more weight than you realize. Wei Chen nodded, the burden of her words sinking deep. I feel it too. The court is fracturing. Madame Lion's eyes softened for a moment as she glanced toward the window where the palace gardens lay shrouded in moonlight. There are forces at play that seek to rewrite history, to erase not just the emperor but all who stand with him. Your art must walk a dangerous path between truth and illusion, loyalty and resistance. The painter's mind raced. Every brushstroke, every hidden symbol embedded in his work was now a political act, a silent rebellion or a tool of oppression. He realized that the murals and portraits were no longer mere images. They were battlegrounds for memory and power. Later that evening, Wei Chen found himself wandering the palace corridors, the muted echoes of whispered conversations guiding him. He paused outside a secluded garden where shadows danced beneath the moonlight. There, hidden among the flowering jasmine, he glimpsed Madame Lion speaking softly with Minister Xiao, the emperor's stern and unforgiving enforcer. Their voices were hushed, laden with a mixture of loyalty and desire, a secret romance that complicated the already tangled web of palace intrigue. Wei Chen watched from the shadows, the weight of secrets pressing heavily on his chest. The fragile alliances and hidden affections within these walls were as delicate and dangerous as the silken threads that adorned the emperor's robes. Back in his chamber, Wei Chen pondered the precariousness of his position. The emperor's image had to be flawless, eternal, yet the man himself was vulnerable, haunted by fear and the relentless march of time. To immortalize the emperor was to participate in his erasure to paint power while concealing humanity. Minister Xiao's presence loomed ever larger in the palace, his watchful eyes reminding Wei Chen of the consequences of defiance. The political tides were rising, and with them the risks of his forbidden creations. As the days passed, Wei Chen's paintings grew ever more complex, layered with subtle symbols of resistance and truth hidden beneath the veneer of imperial grandeur. Jin Hoa's youthful idealism fueled his courage, pushing him to challenge the boundaries of obedience and artistic expression. Yet with every stroke, the danger tightened around them. Wei Chen's heart pounded with anxious anticipation, knowing that the fractures within the court were spreading like cracks in porcelain, beautiful but fragile and ready to shatter. The studio was cloaked in twilight when Wei Chen settled before the canvases, his brush poised between colors that seemed to bleed away like fading memories. The heavy silence of the palace pressed in on him, broken only by the faint rustle of silk robes and the distant murmur of guards in the hallways. His hand trembled slightly, a hesitation that had become frequent in recent days. He dipped the brush into muted ink, the liquid pooling dark and thick before he lifted it to the canvas. The emperor's face emerged beneath his strokes, not as the vibrant, commanding figure the court desired, but as a spectral echo. The eyes, once fierce and commanding, now blurred into shadows. The lines that should have conveyed strength instead dissolved into mist, the features softening until the visage appeared hollow, a ghost trapped between presence and absence. Wei Chen's heart tightened at the sight. With each stroke, he was not immortalizing the emperor, he was erasing him. "Why do you hesitate?" The voice cut through the quiet, sharp and uncompromising. Minister Zhao stood in the doorway, his dark robes rustling like a storm cloud about to break. His eyes bore into Wei Chen's, carrying the weight of imperial command, unapologetic and unyielding. Wei Chen lowered his brush, swallowing the turmoil that churned within. "My work will honor the emperor," he said carefully, though the words tasted bitter. "It must reflect his glory." Minister Zhao stepped forward, the aura of authority a palpable force in the room. "Glory is not found in doubt or half measures. Complete the task as decreed. The portraits are not for your conscience, but for the empire's legacy." The painter's gaze flickered back to the canvas, to the fading monarch whose humanity was dissolving beneath his brush. The weight of Ereshkigal was no longer just the emperor's, it was his own. Each stroke that obliterated the imperfections of the sovereign also chipped away at the integrity of the artist himself. Later that night, Wei Chen sat alone in the quiet corridor outside the forbidden mural chambers, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and incense. A soft step approached, and Madame Lion's familiar silhouette emerged from the shadows. Her silver-streaked hair caught the faint lantern light, her dark eyes sharp and knowing. "You carry a heavy burden," she said gently, sitting beside him on the polished stone bench. He sighed, the weight of his conflicted soul pressing down. "How can I paint what must be forgotten? How do I preserve truth when my brush must extinguish it?" Madame Lion's gaze was steady, unwavering. "In this palace, truth is a fragile thing, often sacrificed for survival. But even in silence, there are whispers. Your art can speak beyond the walls if you dare to listen." Her words stirred something within Wei Chen, a flicker of courage amid despair. Days passed, and in the secluded corners of the palace, Jin Ho's youthful energy offered a stark contrast. The apprentice's ink-stained fingers danced across scraps of parchment, sketches alive with raw emotion and unfiltered truth. Watching him, Wei Chen felt a spark rekindled, a reminder of why he had chosen this path of creation despite its dangers. Master Jinhua said one afternoon, eyes bright with defiance, "Why must we erase what makes us human? Is there no beauty in imperfection?" Wei Chen's heart clenched. "The world we live in demands illusions, but the truth, your truth, may yet survive in the spaces we dare to leave unpainted." As the final portraits took shape, a haunting duality settled over Wei Chen's work, images that captured both the emperor's grandeur and his vanishing essence. The brush strokes were both tribute and erasure, memory and oblivion intertwined. With each passing day, Wei Chen felt his own identity blur, swallowed by the very shadows he summoned on canvas. The palace halls whispered of change, and Wei Chen knew that the price of silence was higher than he had ever imagined. Yet in the depths of melancholy, a fragile hope endured, a hope born from the delicate balance between creation and destruction, between what is remembered and what is lost. And as the moon rose high over the forbidden city, Wei Chen's brush trembled once more, poised to paint the next stroke in the delicate dance between art and mortality. The quiet of the late afternoon in the palace was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the faintest whisper or the softest footfall. Wei Chen sat alone in his chamber, the pale light from the lattice window casting delicate shadows across his half-finished portrait. The emperor's visage stared back at him, noble, serene, but hollow beneath the brushwork. The weight of his task bore down on him more heavily than ever. A gentle knock at the door drew Wei Chen's attention. He turned, and there stood Lan Ying, the palace servant whose presence had become an unexpected source of comfort. Her dark eyes flickered with a quiet urgency, her expression carefully guarded. Without a word, she stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. Lan Ying approached the table where Wei Chen's brushes lay, her fingers brushing against the worn wood as she reached into the folds of her simple robe. From within she produced a small, folded note, which she slid into the brush holder with a barely perceptible motion. "For your eyes only," she whispered, her voice low and steady. Wei Chen's fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded the parchment. The ink was faded, but the words were clear, whispers of rebellion, murmurs of discontent among the ministers, and a growing undercurrent of fear within the palace walls. The note spoke of plots brewing in the shadows, plans to undermine the emperor's fragile hold on power. His heart pounded as he folded the note back, meeting Lan Ying's gaze. "How do you know all this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, then replied, "I serve many masters, and my ears hear what others miss. The palace is a web, and sometimes even the smallest thread carries a secret. I cannot say more, but you must be careful." The painter nodded slowly, a mixture of gratitude and unease washing over him. Lan Ying's quiet bravery was a lifeline in the midst of encroaching darkness. In the days that followed, she became a subtle ally, delivering fragments of overheard conversations, warning of increased surveillance, and offering moments of calm in an otherwise suffocating world. Their alliance was unspoken but profound. In fleeting glances and hushed exchanges, they shared a recognition of the peril that surrounded them. Wei Chen found himself drawing strength from her presence, even as the shadows lengthened within his own soul. One evening, as the palace settled into a heavy silence, Lan Ying moved silently through the corridors, her footsteps muffled by thick carpets. She gathered whispers from servants and guards alike, fragments of fear and defiance that painted a picture of a court on the brink. Returning to Wei Chen, she conveyed these delicate truths with a careful balance of hope and warning. The painter listened intently, the faces behind the whispers weaving into his mind like brushstrokes on a canvas, each one a story of loyalty, betrayal, and survival. His own portrait of the emperor seemed to shift under his gaze, the painted eyes reflecting a man caught between worlds. As dusk filtered through the lattice window, Wei Chen sat alone once more, the fading light mirroring the quiet desperation within. The knowledge Lan Ying had shared was both a gift and a burden, illuminating dangers he could no longer ignore. He dipped his brush into the inkwell, the bristles trembling slightly as he contemplated the path ahead. In the stillness, a single thought echoed: how much truth could survive the erasure, and at what cost to the painter's own soul. Wei Chen's journey through shadows and secrets was far from over, but with Lan Ying's whisper as his guide, he felt a fragile hope flicker amid the encroaching night. The palace held many secrets, and he was determined to paint them one brushstroke at a time. In the quiet sanctuary of the hidden mural chamber, shadows lengthened as the day waned, and Wei Chen stood before his latest canvas, brush poised delicately between thumb and forefinger. The air was thick with the scent of ink and drying pigments, mingling with the faint scent of incense from the outer palace halls. His eyes, deep and contemplative, traced the emerging figure of Emperor Zhu Yujian, a visage both regal and ephemeral, painted not only with colors, but with the weight of a crumbling dynasty. The strokes were no longer mere reproduction. They breathed life into an illusion, a dance between memory and oblivion. Wei Chen's brush swept across the canvas, blurring the emperor's sharp features into swirling mists that curled like smoke, dissipating yet never fully vanishing. Around the figure, faint, almost imperceptible tendrils of shadow intertwined with symbols drawn from ancient scrolls: the phoenix, the lotus, the broken sword, each laden with meaning, each a secret message whispered in pigment. Jin Hoa, his young apprentice, sat nearby, watching with intense eyes that flickered with both admiration and quiet rebellion. His slender fingers, stained with ink from his own tentative sketches, tapped softly against the wooden floor. "Master," he whispered, voice barely above the rustling silk of their robes, "why do you paint the emperor with shadows and mist? Does the court not desire a clear image, a symbol of strength?" Wei Chen's gaze did not waver from the canvas. "A clear image is but a mask, Jin Hoa. What we see is never the whole truth. The emperor's reign is not merely strength. It is frailty and fear woven beneath the silk robes. My brush must tell both stories, the seen and the hidden." The apprentice nodded slowly, absorbing the paradox. This art was no longer a simple act of creation, but a subtle rebellion, a coded conversation with the future. Yet, with each secret symbol imbued in the paintings, the risk grew. Minister Zhou's watchful eyes and the palace's unforgiving order loomed ever larger. A sudden, soft creak announced the arrival of Madame Lion. Her presence was as commanding as ever, her silver-streaked hair shimmering under the lantern light, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. She approached the canvas, her fingers lightly tracing the edges of the painted mist. "You weave a dangerous spell with your brush, Wei Chen," she murmured, voice low and tinged with both warning and sorrow. "These illusions may preserve memory, but they also kindle shadows that could consume us all." Wei Chen met her gaze, the weight of his secret pressing heavily upon his chest. "Is it not the artist's burden to navigate such shadows, madam? To offer the truth hidden beneath the surface?" She sighed, a sound like the whisper of silk against stone. "Beware the cost of such truth. The palace does not forgive those who undermine the emperor's image." As she departed, the chamber seemed colder, the flickering lantern light casting long, wavering shadows that danced upon the walls like restless spirits. Wei Chen turned back to his work, the image of the emperor now complete, a haunting blend of majesty and vulnerability. The imperial mask fractured by the subtle illusions woven deep within the paint. Later, as the moon rose high over the palace, a fleeting figure passed by the chamber's lattice window, Emperor Zhu Yujian himself, drawn silently to witness his likeness. His eyes, inscrutable and deep, lingered on the portrait. For a moment the veneer of imperial resolve cracked, revealing a flicker of fear and loneliness beneath. The emperor's gaze met the painted shadows, as if recognizing the fragile truth that Wei Chen dared to capture. Yet, the political unrest tightening around the palace walls was a silent storm, and this fragile moment of vulnerability was destined to be swallowed by the tides of history. Wei Chen stepped back, heart heavy yet resolute. His art had become a battleground between memory and oblivion, truth and illusion, loyalty and rebellion. Every stroke was a risk, every hidden symbol a silent plea for remembrance amid the erasure. And as the night deepened, the painter knew the lines between reality and dream, between the emperor's legacy and his own fate, were growing ever more blurred. The illusions deepened, and with them, the fragile hope that art might one day outlast the shadows of empire. But the question remained, hanging like mist in the cold air. How far could he push these illusions before the palace's unforgiving gaze turned from suspicion to condemnation? The answer would come with the dawn, and with it, the next chapter in the haunting dance between creation and destruction. Wei Chen's brush hesitated at the edge of the canvas, ready to continue weaving the story that would define not only an emperor's legacy but the fragile soul of the artist who dared to paint the vanishing truth. The chamber was suffused with a heavy stillness, punctuated only by the faint crackling of incense burning low in its ornate holder. Wei Chen sat quietly before his easel, the soft whisper of his brush against the silk canvas, the sole sound breaking the hush. Outside, the palace bustled with its usual masked urgency, but here, in this hidden room, time seemed to slow, contracting into a tight knot of anticipation and dread. This was the moment he had dreaded since the Emperor's decree, the final portrait session. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm mask he wore for the courtiers and guards beyond the chamber's heavy doors. The brush felt heavier than usual, weighted not by its own material, but by the impossible burden it carried, the task to immortalize a sovereign while erasing his true self. Wei Chen's eyes flicked to the delicate pigments arranged meticulously on the lacquered table, each color a possibility, each stroke a choice between truth and oblivion. A faint rustle at the threshold drew his attention. Madame Lion emerged from the shadows, her silver-streaked hair catching the muted candlelight. Her dark eyes held a depth of understanding and a quiet fire that belied her calm demeanor. "Wei Chen," she whispered, stepping closer, "this is your moment of reckoning. Remember what the murals have taught us: truth often hides in the spaces between brushstrokes." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Her words were both a warning and a balm. The forbidden murals she had shown him, those silent witnesses to history's erasures, had awakened something within him, a desire to resist the hollow perfection demanded by the court. The heavy doors creaked open. Emperor Zhu Yujian entered, his presence filling the chamber with an imposing gravity. Clad in imperial robes embroidered with dragons and phoenixes, he looked every bit the ruler the world expected him to be. Yet, as Wei Chen's eyes met the emperor's, he saw beyond the regal facade the flicker of vulnerability, the silent fear of an impermanent throne. "Wei Chen," the emperor's voice was steady but carried a wariness that spoke of sleepless nights and unspoken burdens. "Today, you will complete the image that the empire will remember." Wei Chen bowed deeply, setting his resolve. "Your Majesty, I shall honor your wishes." As the emperor settled onto the carved chair, Wei Chen began to paint. The initial strokes were precise, capturing the emperor's commanding posture and dignified countenance as required. But beneath the surface, his brush danced a secret dance, subtle shifts in color, a faint shadow beneath the eyes, the suggestion of a tear almost lost in the swirl of gold and crimson. Each stroke was a silent act of rebellion, a whispered truth hidden beneath layers of imperial grandeur. Wei Chen's heart pounded as he worked, aware that discovery would mean ruin not only for him, but perhaps for those who dared to whisper truths within these walls. Midway through the session, Minister Zhao entered without announcement, his sharp gaze sweeping the room. His presence was a stark reminder of the ever-watchful eyes enforcing the emperor's will. "Painter," Minister Zhao's voice cut through the silence, "ensure your work reflects the glory of the throne, not the frailty of the man." Wei Chen met his gaze steadily. "My brush serves the empire, minister." A slight nod from Zhao, but his eyes narrowed, suspicion simmering beneath his disciplined exterior. Madame Lion's presence at the door seemed to steady Wei Chen. Her silent encouragement was a lifeline amid the suffocating tension. As the final moments approached, Wei Chen applied the last stroke, a near-invisible tear glistening in the emperor's painted eye. It was a fragile concession to truth, a secret preserved in pigment and shadow. The emperor studied the portrait, his inscrutable gaze lingering on the subtle imperfection. A flicker of recognition passed through his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the man beneath the myth. "It is done," Wei Chen said softly, stepping back. The chamber held its breath. Outside, the wheels of history turned relentlessly, but here, in this fragile space, a dangerous choice had been made, one that would ripple through the palace's gilded halls and into the uncertain future. Wei Chen's heart thundered with a mixture of fear and defiance. The path ahead was uncertain, and the weight of his secret would press upon him like the heavy silks of the emperor's robes. Yet, in that hidden tear, art had preserved a sliver of humanity, a beacon against the erasure that threatened to consume them all.